I want to welcome those of you who are joining us for this program called All Stressed Up for the Holidays, an opportunity for us to talk about the stress of the holidays, the anxiety that it often produces, the stress of relationships that may or may not be going well at any particular time, the busyness of the season that often causes us to feel more anxious, the expense of the season that certainly can add to the stress levels for everyone involved, and just all the busyness that we have going on this time of year. We are very pleased to have 4 panelists with us for this program, and I want to welcome each of them. Melanie Childers is Director of Pastoral Services for the Appalachian Regional Healthcare System. Kimberly Setzer is a licensed clinical social worker, Director of Grief Services at Amarim Hospice. Jackie Henry is a clinical psychologist in private practice with a specialty in mindfulness, which is certainly helpful this time of year. And Steve Marks is an associate at First Presbyterian in Boone, right now transitioning into a new focus. I want to say thanks and how much I appreciate your being with us here for this program. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're watching, and I hope this is a program that will offer support and strength and advice and some ways in which you can know that you're not alone in your stress, and also some strategies for dealing with it. One other thing I do want to say is that we had a similar program sponsored by Rumpel Memorial Presbyterian Church last year, and that focus, this focus of that program was more on the aspects of those who were grieving and experiencing particularly the first time through the holidays after having lost a loved one. And we will touch on that, but that program is still online. And if that meets your needs, if you'd like to watch that too, please send me a note, and I will be glad to send you the link to that program. So we want to start by talking about the stress of the season and the ways in which you all see that stress manifest in your own lives, but also in the lives of those with whom you are working. So I'm just going to throw that out, and whoever would like to start talking about it, talk about your experience as you see the impact of the season on the folks with whom you work and minister and serve between Thanksgiving. Really, it starts before Thanksgiving nowadays, but through the month of December.
Well, I'll go first. Certainly, we're in that season now, and I've got the unique opportunity that I get to see the stress from the standpoint of someone who works in a church, and there's lots of stress on folks who are active in their worship committees at church or that are in ministry, because this is a busy time of the year. And then certainly the stress, I work a lot with students, high school and college students, and this is a stressful time as we approach exams, as we approach the end of a semester, as folks who are perhaps spending time away from family in a university setting are missing holiday activities with family. And then certainly just, I think we've become such a busy society that it's hard for us to wind down to really enjoy what the holidays bring us.
I'll add to that, just a sense from the hospital's perspective. A lot of our patients who were maybe expecting an idyllic kind of holiday have the opposite experience when something devastating has happened. And so it can create a lot of stress on top of the illness or the injury or the accident or whatever that it happens on a holiday. But interestingly, our staff are very accustomed to finding workarounds, because everybody has to work on a holiday sometime, our nursing staff especially. And so they are used to doing holidays on different dates, or just adjusting their family schedules so that they can still celebrate, but do it at different times. So I think it is a very stressful time, especially when there are unexpected blips in a person's anticipated celebration.
And that includes their loved ones as well, right? Family and
Yes,
friends, those who are anxious about the health of the person in the hospital.
sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, can be a very destabilizing, upsetting time. Yeah.
Well, I was thinking a lot about some of the characteristics for particularly for women who seem to sometimes be the holder of all the traditions. Particularly when it's around food, things that people associate with Christmas in families or in communities, and the stress that women sometimes feel about upholding all of that and making sure that everything is 100% perfect.
And traditionally, women have been responsible for so much of the food preparation around family gatherings, and that is exhausting and stressful. In what ways do you find that the stress affects the people that you work with? In other words, when you talk with them or when you observe them, how are they different than the most of the rest of the time of year? What ways is it visible to you, or what ways do they report it being impacting their lives?
It's interesting as we approach, Christmas, and we're in the season of Advent, sort of waiting and patience. That becomes a real focal point because patience becomes short-lived. Tempers often flare. People will snap, and and they sense that, but it's like they can't really control it. And I think that's a manifestation of some of that stress. I've had coworkers and congregational members and even students that will snap, and then they'll turn right around and they'll apologize. So they recognize it, but in the same sense, it is this underlying stress that just kind of creeps to the surface. And I think really um, that most people are polite outside of their circle of close friends and loved ones, and it's those of us that are those close friends and loved ones that bear the brunt of a lot of that, I believe.
And when you say snap, can you describe some of the ways, some of the ways we snap?
Well, just out of character comments and retorts, inappropriate comments, or maybe uncharacteristic would be a better definition. Um, something gets said, and you look at that individual, and it's like, did you really just say that to me? It's sort of out of the blue, unexpected.
Very observant, very accurate. Uh, and you mentioned earlier the stress of the folks who work in churches, which are extremely busy time of the year. There have been times, I will admit, that by Christmas Eve, I have been known to say, "I hate Christmas." And one of the nice things about being retired is that I've started liking it again.
I think too, it'd be interesting from Melanie and Jackie's perspective um, that often we're placed in positions of expectation, either to fix things or to at least be a listening ear, often without considering our own stresses, and that adds even more, I think, to the plate.
I was expectations are huge. Both the ones that we place on ourselves. When I was in grad school, there was this poster over this professor's wall that said, please, a picture of a person praying, please remove this self-imposed task. from me. I love that. It was the highlight of my graduate career to see that and think about it, because we tend to add things to our own life and pile on. And especially I've been caught recently thinking about the end of the year coming so close on top of this, and things that happen at the end of the year, and self-reflection, and things like that. All of that can add expectations that are just unreasonable, that are out of balance with what we can do and what we should be thinking that we can do. I think it's really important for me and for people that are experiencing that to think ahead about what is reasonable. Discuss with family members, with friends, what is reasonable for me to think that I can do this season, given this amount of time, given this amount of energy, given what's happening in my life right now. And what's reasonable?
Great idea.
So that's one thing.
And maybe some opportunities to talk with some other folks about what is reasonable, because I think those self-imposed tasks are tasks that we maybe think other people are expecting of us, or in order to be the person that people expect us to be, we need to do these things. And it may be that folks just think you're doing it because you want to, and that with some conversation and sharing, you can get a more realistic understanding of what you need to be doing and what other people may want to help with.
Yeah, and given that, one thing that you might want to think about are, what things do I not have to do this year? What tasks do I need to remove from myself? What self-imposed task needs to disappear this year? Anything we can do to make expectations more reasonable is super important this time of year.
Can you think of some things that the folks, either you personally or the folks that you've worked with, have looked at and said, yeah, I don't have to do that this year?
I was amused because it hadn't really occurred to me recently. But my husband's a Presbyterian minister, and my birthday is December 23rd. And I have this need to apologize every year for imposing on his Christmas time. Whether it's a caroling event, whatever kind of event it is,
right,
on the 23rd.
Yeah.
So my expectations of what to do over the close to Christmas time is a little different maybe than other people, but it's a whole lot more reasonable and stress reducing for me not to have huge expectations about what can be accomplished on December 23rd.
Isn't that difficult, though, to feel almost guilty that you were born on the 23rd of December? As if you had something to say about that. Yeah. Melanie, what were you going to say a few moments ago?
Well, I think part of what compounds that those expectations is our society's frenetic expectations in general. We have kind of a pathological relationship with frenetic activity, to the point where we gain status according to how busy we are. And I think that creates all kinds of challenges for us. And then when we get and add the holidays on top of that, it can really just kind of explode in terms of completely unrealistic expectations and unreasonable expectations. So I appreciate what Jackie was saying about revisiting what those expectations really should be, and be willing to think outside the box about different ways of honoring the season. It does not have to be something every night of the week for 3.5 weeks straight.
I think that is tremendously important. So many times I've said it, and other people have said, how are you doing? And you say, I'm so busy. As if that that's a good thing. That it brings you some kind of respect that you're busy. How can we go about changing our approach to or understanding of busyness as particularly a good thing?
Busyness serves a lot of different functions. So, I mean, if I address one, I'm hoping other people can do some other pieces, because this is just one way. The busyness takes us out of the moment. You know, if it truly does. We spend a ton of time planning, a ton of time thinking about what we need to do by this particular date or by this particular date. And then we never find ourselves exactly where we are. We're always someplace different, which tends to rob us of what we could have in a moment. So being able to slow down and really be present in the moment is not always an easy thing, because it brings, it may bring us in touch with worries that we don't want to be in touch with. It might bring us in touch with all kinds of things that are present in our lives that we don't have to really work on or manage when we're so busy.
That almost sounds like the self-medication, doesn't it? If we stay busy enough, we don't have to deal with the present and perhaps the pain or something else that might be going on. We can put that on the back burner because we're too busy to focus on it right now. That's really interesting.
I think generationally as well, we have come to equate busyness in terms of accomplishments as a piece of self-worth. And so we then value that busyness as who we are. And that is certainly unhealthy, if not dangerous, but it has become, I really think, a societal concept. And it's unfortunate that we've probably placed that on our younger generations as well. I'm fortunate, having grown up in public safety, that when we have to be busy, we're out saving somebody's life. And so we recognize that we can't be 100% of the time. There has to be some downtime there. And so that becomes ingrained in even the alpha firefighters and paramedics that are out there serving their communities 24/7, that there has to be some self-care prescribed in order to succeed. And I think we need to find a way to take that same model and let folks understand that everyone needs to shed some of that busyness, especially in order to care for themselves, because it goes right back to that stress model, I think.
Maybe it's beyond the scope of this conversation to change our mindset about it, but what are some ways that we can change the busyness, especially here in the busiest part of the year? Hi, Kimberly. We've been talking for a few minutes about the busyness that not only is a part of the season, but seems to be a part of, as Steve said, almost a part of our gauging of our self-worth. The busier we are, the more important we are. That may be a good lead-in question for you if you've got some thoughts about that.
Absolutely. I think it's just kind of a bit of a pandemic in society in general that we stay overly busy, but that's exacerbated a lot throughout the holidays. In my work, specifically focusing on trauma recovery and grief work, we talk a lot about that, because in terms of folks who are grieving, especially those grieving a recent loss, they don't always have the energy level to keep up with their typical demands of busyness. And so one thing that we've really encouraged people to do is literally take a step back, sit down with a pen and paper, and write out, what do the holidays mean to you? What is it that you're celebrating? Why do they hold significance? And focus on what you're celebrating or the days that you're trying to honor versus all of the traditions that you typically carry or all the items that you typically commit yourself to. So I think it's really helpful if people can really focus in on, why am I doing this? What is the purpose behind this? When we focus on the purpose behind what we're doing, then we can give ourselves permission to engage or disengage as we need to, as we physically, emotionally, spiritually can show up.
That's great. That's really helpful, because we do we uh, we engage in so many things that are not central. Not I you reminded me of a sermon I preached on Christmas Eve many years ago, probably 25 years ago, in a previous church, where I was kind of focusing on that theme, and I started out saying that we don't have to have. I joked about the fact that we always have mashed potatoes at Christmas, and that's one of my favorite things. We don't have to have mashed potatoes. We don't even have to have a big meal at Christmas, and we don't have to have as many presents as we have. And then I said we don't even have to have Santa Claus to have Christmas. And we had our children's choir sitting at in the front several pews of the church, and this collective gasp came from them. I had to reassure them that Santa was a part of Christmas that year, but we do have this tendency, as you said, a pandemic to think we have to focus on so many things that are not core parts of what we're celebrating, whatever that may be, this time of year.
I think, again, to go with what Melanie had said earlier about all of the expectations that our society, culture, community places on us, that these are all important. These have to all be represented. And so being able to disengage from that, it's difficult, and it does sometimes require talking. And I'm sure Kimberly knows this in her work, that it's not always something that a person can figure out themselves, what is important to them and what isn't. So being able to have someone or a group of people to help with that, to help disengage from pieces that might not be important to you, and certainly don't match up with the flyers that we get in the news, in our newspaper or on TV about this, and this. It's really kind of interesting how those play unconsciously a part in our
Talk more about
mind. Well, in terms of this, kind of goes along with something else that is really important to me when I work with people at this time of year, are the expectations that this is a happy time. This should be the hallmark of all of the amazing, wonder, joy-filled moments that we can have. And because there is also this emphasis on busyness, we have to work to have that, make that happen, right? We can't let it happen. It's, you can only, it's got to be worked on and provided. These are the pressures that are on us that I don't think we always know about, because they're mores and values that are being pumped into our home from the internet, from all over. So being able to acknowledge, hey, I don't feel happy, and that's going to be okay right now, because that's the way it is. Some acceptance about what's realistic. What are our feelings? Oh, people aren't going to be happy nonstop through December. It may come in sneaky moments, but not because we're busy and we make it happen.
Yeah, I think sometimes having a disruptor in our general preparations and expressions of the holiday can be the catalyst for us to slow down and to reevaluate and to ask some of those questions that others have been mentioning, because the society's pressure is so strong. It is countercultural to slow down. I read a book recently called Rest as Resistance, because resting is really poo-pooed. You're lazy if you rest. And so I think we can't underestimate or overestimate how powerful that pull is on us. And so sometimes I think it does take an external kind of disruptor to say, I can't do it like I usually do it. And so now let's reevaluate and determine what is most important. What are my values about this? And can I focus on one thing that really matters?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Can you give an example of how you've seen that happen?
I think an easy example is having a big meal with all of your family present. And sometimes you don't need it, or it's not possible, or you just don't have the energy to do it. And my family's going to have pizza for Christmas because it is so exhausting to put all that energy into the food preparation that then the people who are preparing the food don't have any energy left to enjoy the family. So I think you can take any one thing and say, do I really need to do this?
A disruptor may be that it's been a very difficult year financially, and we're just not going to be able to give presents the way we normally do. And let's cut back to each person gets one gift. And boy, would that cut back on the amount of shopping and the amount of expense that would likely reduce the stress levels for most folks.
Ken, in our grief work that we do with folks, a lot of times we talk about tradition, and we talk about how when there's significant people in your family or your support circle that are missing because they've passed away, everything will not be the same. And we have that tendency to try to keep everything the same year to year, or improve upon, or do more, or add more to the schedule, which is right along with what we're talking about. And what we encourage folks to do is to really evaluate those traditions and go ahead and identify what's going to be different without a certain person or certain people there. And that, that could be for a variety of things. Maybe people just can't come into town, or you can't travel, or maybe people in your family or your circle have passed away. And go ahead and prepare for traditions to change when circumstances change. Sometimes we see people really caught off guard. They're trying so hard, whether that comes from a state of denial or just clinging to hope and love and tradition to keep everything exactly the same. And they're so disappointed when things aren't the same. And so we try to encourage people to be proactive and to identify what will change because my circumstances either permanently or temporarily have changed. And to put a positive spin on that is, where is there opportunity for some new tradition? And we always really encourage families to include children or teens. To be totally honest, they handle grief and change a little better than we do as adults sometimes. And a lot of times they have great ideas of new traditions or ways to make adaptations to traditions and things that we've done, or how we can keep a piece of that but change it a little bit and make it work for the people that will be present this year. And so we really encourage folks to take a proactive approach to that and go ahead and try to figure out what may be different. That way there's not so much of an element of shock or disappointment when things do change. And that can also go to gift giving or meals. You could really apply that logic to anything.
It's a great idea. Thanks for that. That's very practical kind of advice. What do you find the folks that you care for, care with, minister to. What are the things that they need to hear in this time of year when stress and busyness seem to be such a high expectation, either placed upon themselves or placed by society, or both?
I'll start out because I probably represent a different perspective than our other three panelists in that I don't generally offer counsel. And so what I bring to the table is a listening ear. And I think often instead of needing to hear something, our folks just need to be heard. And so simply sitting with people and letting them tell their story, whatever their story might be, with a non-judgmental, non-anxious presence is what I and a lot of the folks that I work with are able to offer, because we don't have that counseling background. So that's just another piece, I think, to the whole holistic concept of how we can reduce stress in this time, in this season.
I think listening is by far the most important thing that we can offer. Inviting people to share their discouragement, their disappointment, their disillusionment, or their joy, and having that validated, listening and truly hearing another person's perspective is very validating. And it can help people feel less alone. So I agree with Steve. I think that's the most important thing we can do. I also think sometimes it's helpful to hear that it's okay to say no, that it's okay. You can have permission to do things differently, that there are ways to reframe the experience after it has been heard and validated.
And I think it's such an important thing just to remind people that it's okay to say no. It really is okay, even if that presents some expectations from other people. Oh no, you can't say no. But that's a very helpful thing to hear.
I think a lot of people do things they don't want to do during the holidays because of obligation or expectation or perceived expectation. And why?
You all have been really helpful in talking about some practical kinds of things, but what are some other practices that you have found to be helpful to offer to folks when they find themselves stressed or anxious or dealing with strained relationships because of the busyness or the other stresses of the year, of this time of year? What are some other practical things that we can share?
Well, we are incredibly lucky in the sense of where we live and what we see outside our window or when we walk. We live in a place where awesomeness is everywhere all the time. And it's an incredible gift, and it's ours 24/7. And so sometimes I think being able to disengage and just breathe, walk. I had the opportunity. Something I really love to do is going out and seeing a sunset. And so a group of us went out to see a sunset that was it was pretty much non-existent because there were too many clouds.
Right.
On Sunday night. And just as we had about given up, and an incredible experience of just being with each other and enjoying being outside, suddenly there was a beautiful pink glow in one corner, and that's awesome. That's all. It's a glimmer. I think sometimes that we think all is about seeing the Grand Canyon or the Rocky Mountains but it doesn't have to be. It can be that glimmer in the left-hand side of the mountain, just peeking up and it was amazing. And we all just gasped from that experience. Those actually plop us into the moment instead of taking us out of the moment. They stick us right down where we are. And it's a good grounding experience in addition.
But you have to stop, right? You
Have to
stop and watch the sunset. You have to stop. A good friend of mine wrote a song recently called "Take a Long Look Around," and it's that same. But you have to stop to do that. Yeah.
Well, and in a mindfulness practice, somebody will say, if you don't have time for mindfulness, that's exactly when you need to be using it, which is always a good reminder. We're like, oh, I don't have time for that. Oh, that's right. That's exactly why I need to do that.
Yeah, very true.
I think, Ken, building on what Jackie was just saying, is we really encourage and empower people to be sure that they're using some positive coping skills. And mindfulness, of course, is one of those. But just paying particular attention to taking care of yourself physically and mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, and being sure that we've got, 2 or 3 really good, reliable, dependable coping skills that we're going to commit to engaging in. During the holidays, especially, that's really important. And that can be as simple as, I'm going to make sure that I stay hydrated. We all probably tend to run dehydrated, or getting sleep, setting my bedtime, setting my wake time. It can be very simple ways. Self-care and coping is not complicated. It's usually our commitment where we struggle. And so just ensuring that people are addressing it from those different perspectives is really important. Most of us are really good at one type of coping skill, maybe 2, but we rarely get all 3 or 4. And so just having that self-awareness of where I do struggle and making that a priority. I think also one thing that's really important, especially at the holidays, but I would say anytime throughout the year or throughout the different seasons of our own life, when we work with folks that are grieving, it really challenges you to reevaluate your entire life. But we really focus on helping people do that with the holidays or with celebrations. And when we think about the holidays that are already here or that are approaching, being able to prioritize what is most important to us during that time, and giving our time and attention to that, and maybe carve out some of the things that don't hold that significance, and giving people that empowerment or helping them find that empowerment is really helpful. Sometimes, as we've been talking, people need to be heard, people need to be validated, but sometimes they need encouragement from other people to prioritize what really is most important for them, but also most important for their well-being. And it could be as simple as, I have a chronic health condition, I'm at high risk, I need to limit the number of in-person gatherings that I'm going to. So I'm going to set 1 and 2 as my priorities and kind of let the others go. And being able to just set that boundary. A lot of people have a hard time setting boundaries, but also holding those boundaries. And so encouraging that for people. And if we're being transparent, we probably all need to be reminded of that as well. I know I was looking at my holiday calendar over the weekend with my husband and thought, it happens every year. Every year we say we're not going to do this, and here we are. And just, we kind of had to whittle a couple of things off because there literally was not enough time for rest. And it's okay to make rest a priority. We really struggle with that in our society, and I think someone else kind of stated that as well. But just setting those priorities throughout the whole year, but especially at the holidays, seems significantly important.
Yeah. That reminds me of a book I read a number of years ago. The title of the book is Margin. And it is about the fact that the books that are easiest to read have lots of white space, have margins, so that when you cram words and letters onto a page where they're so crammed together you can hardly see them, it's exhausting to read that. But books that have lots of nice wide margins on the right and left and top and bottom, and it makes it easier to read that. And so the point obviously was, when we set margins, when we create margins of blank space in our lives, that which is printed, if you will, becomes easier and more impactful in being able to do. And I hear all of you kind of saying that, all of us, that busyness is not something to brag about. It does not make us more important or more worthy. In fact, it makes it more difficult to enjoy the time, to enjoy the relationships that we have, but to create that space, to be in the moment, as Jackie said, to cope and take care of ourselves, and therefore thereby enjoy, in the full meaning of that word, the parts of the season that are most important. Yeah, thanks for that. That's reminds me of a good message that I need to keep in mind.
I think too, Ken, one thing that I really try to encourage folks to do, especially those who may be battling deep depression or grief or isolation, do something nice for someone else. Create that positivity or create that beauty in your life. And it can be something really simple and inexpensive. I mean, it could be baking a cake for a neighbor. It could be sending a card. It could be going to share a meal with somebody. Or, it could be something significant. Maybe you adopt a family for Christmas. But when we serve others, we see beauty, but we experience love. And that can really change the whole atmosphere of the holidays.
Sort of following up with what Kimberly said, and I think each one of us has as our own perspectives on this, but we've really not mentioned much about faith and spirituality and how that ties in with the holidays. And certainly for Christians, this is an important holiday, and for Presbyterians, the sovereignty of God and the true sense of who we're serving and what we're doing, and really why busyness doesn't matter in that regard, I think can be well stated. But for folks that perhaps aren't Christian, or that are sort of floundering in their faith in this season, can be very difficult for them, because so much emphasis is placed on the religious piece of the holidays. And so again, I think just being able to have conversations around that, non-confrontational conversations, I think is important. And again, it goes back to that listening ear, but also for us to be able to embrace the fact that we are different, and that there are different ways of looking at things. There are different ways of looking at one's spirituality and one's faith, and being able to be accepting. And I think that much like gratitude, that accepting and even forgiving piece is so important to our well-being in a stressful environment.
I have to piggyback on what Steve said, because that acceptance of others and acceptance of where other people are in their faith at any particular moment is really huge. But also something that we tend to not be able to do very well is accepting our own emotions, feelings, accepting our own times of questioning, and being able to accept, I don't feel joyful right now, and being able for that to be okay, and accepting that, because the opposite is really true. That if you attempt to suppress those feelings that you have of sadness, grief, and when we suppress that, it pops up stronger and more dynamic then we may want to happen. So if we accept it at ground level and don't make it a white bear, a pink elephant that we want to suppress, that can be really huge in terms of allowing ourselves to then even let go of whatever, of that particular worry, thought, or feeling.
One thing that I meant to talk about and touched on a while back, but before we close, I'd like to hear from you all about this, and that is our relationships. The busyness, the stress, the anxiety. Often, as one of you said, we tend to snap at each other. But what can we do to avoid that, or to address that, or to prepare for being on whatever day, Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, New Year's Day, whatever day it might be, when we're with strange Uncle so-and-so, or, that person in the family that we tend to avoid, but we can't on this day, or the person that we've had a disagreement with lately, and things are awkward and difficult. And we're going to spend some time together, and we need to prepare in some way for that. What kind of things do you have you encountered, or do you offer to the people that you serve in dealing with those kinds of relationship struggles this time of year?
I think being aware of our own triggers is important, and being able to think ahead about what kind of common ground might I find with this person, and what do I need to avoid at all costs to avoid, some sort of explosion at the dinner table or whatever. But I think some thinking ahead about those things can be helpful, because there are likely some things that you can talk about.
I think it's important. It's important to acknowledge that it's okay for us to set boundaries, and as we've all said, it's okay to say no. And if there are situations that are going to trigger you, that re-triggers trauma, it's okay to say no and not put yourself in that position. And then maybe to collaborate with someone else. If there's a large family dinner and there is someone there that maybe you have a past with or you're at odds with now, to have someone with you to help maybe de-escalate that situation might be really helpful. But I would say if possible, and all situations are different, but if possible, if you could have a conversation with that person ahead of time to try to reach a resolve, if that's possible. But again, we don't have to do everything. So if there's a situation that we need to avoid for our own mental or physical health, it's okay to do that. But I think one thing that we have encouraged folks to do is sometimes people, especially that are grieving, forget the positive relationships in their life. And so we encourage folks to sometimes write a letter to the people in your family about what they mean to you and how special they are to you, and give that to them. Sometimes we can write things that we have a really hard time saying. And so if I can write those ahead of time and just hand those out, sometimes that allows me to manage my emotions a little better.
I just think it might be helpful to recognize that there's stress when we're having a good time too. I mean, stress is not always just about negative situations. There's stress with positive situation as well. And so just remembering that it pops up all around us.
Yeah, so self-care, even when it's been a great day, some self-care to say, I'm feeling tired, I'm going to go home, or I'm going to pull away. Yeah, that's really a good thing to remember. We can certainly overdo the joy as well. Jane, who has been a part of the audience, just wrote in, and I wanted to share this with you all and with everyone who's watching this. She writes, I joined today to hopefully feel a bit more normal in my life after a big move out of my forever home 900 miles away to assist family. Nothing in all caps is normal, and I need a little normal. Thanks for the talk. And Jane, thank you for writing that. I hope and pray that this season finds some normal for you in whatever way that may be provided. Thank you to Melanie and Jackie and Kimberly and Steve for your time today. This has been so helpful. I have deeply enjoyed not only talking with you, but the wisdom and the care and the support that you have offered in your experience and in your various ways of ministry and caring with and for others. So thank you for that. And I look forward to the ways in which this conversation will help others in the coming days and weeks to find the joy and to experience that joy, to stop enough of the other things so that the joy can happen to them. And if the joy isn't there, to accept that too. That's okay. Not every Christmas has to be joyful. Thank you again to all of you, and thank you to all of you who have been listening and watching. Our thoughts and prayers are with you as well.